respect. Thank you. And I reserve the right to terminate a presentation if submitters criticise elected members or staff or are being disrespectful. We've just a minute early, but Dawn, yes. If you'd like to come forward, and you have 10 minutes. Hello. G'day. So everyone, this is Dawn Lucia. She is presenting submission number 16 on the LTP and 175 on the spatial plan. We have 10 minutes. We'll give you 2 tabs, one at 2 minutes and then one at 1 minute, just to let you know when the session will be.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here today. I'm a little bit nervous. I don't know. I'm just going to read my messy scribble. I don't believe that the GB area between Papua and Jellicoe is a good place for 1,400 small square meter lot homes. We've been told by several professionals who know the land, water, soil, and history of this land that the sewer systems, the drinking water, the storm water, the fire smoke, possible fireplace smoke pollution, the soil quality that exists in the GB area is not a good place to develop housing. We've also been informed that the infrastructure that exists in Greytown is barely up to the acceptable level and has needed to be upgraded for many years, which is new information. I didn't know that. I've only lived here 5 years. We don't believe it's wise to put an extra burden on an already broken system. It's kind of putting the cart before the horse. We've also been told that this last minute upgrade is only a fraction of what's needed for what exists, let alone adding 1,400 more homes. Most people can barely afford the current rates, and adding more unsustainable developments in these areas will probably create more cost. The planet has very little valuable soil, and you propose to develop, well, I'm saying unsustainable and expensive houses, but I'm just making that assumption based on what's been developed to date. Maybe it won't be. Hopefully it won't be. But I think that's criminal to build developments on soil that is good to plant food. And I think it's negligent. It's at the core of my. It really is upsetting to me. So I think that's a waste. So developers have been so far building unsustainable houses that also raise the rates so much, and also the infrastructure is going to cost more. The worst part is the houses aren't even affordable. Everyone's saying we're building affordable housing, but all over New Zealand, I see all this development taking place, and I don't see it being affordable for very many people. There's been so much research and information about really building sustainable developments right here in New Zealand. And because of this, I found out about it. It's called howwelive.co.nz. I don't know if the council's familiar with that, but it's a New Zealand-based, it's a lot of great information. If we're going, I'm not against development, but if we're going to develop, I think we should do so in a responsible, thoughtful, conscious manner that will be affordable. So that's howwelive.co.nz. It shows how it can be done. I've heard that Masterton and Carterton are open to these ideas and have kept up to date with upgrading the infrastructure. There's a meeting that's going to take place in Carterton at the end of June, which I've called and left a message for our council here. Hopefully somebody will be attending that. I've just found all this out in the last few weeks. I've never been notified of any of these plans, and I find it very upsetting that this kind of change can take place. So few people in the community knowing about what's taking place. I've talked to so many people, and the majority of people I talk to do not know what's going on. They just hear of things. And I mean, we get our, well, I'll say that again. I believe that these kind of changes and decisions need to be mailed out to every home and have time to meet in person, have more questions and answers, and have more time to plan for it. This feels like it's just going to go through with whatever, has been decided, and the majority of people don't even know about it. I'm not against development change. I just think we, including myself, have been selfish human beings on the planet, damaging our planet, our air, being greedy, You know, we've lost the plot and we don't make time to make really wise plans for our future. I think this is an important, this is an opportunity to create something wonderful. And this plan just sounds like the same old thing that we've been doing for ages. So, you know, if we had, we get our council rates in the mail. Why didn't we get this in the mail? It shouldn't be, I don't think we should rely on social media and the newspapers because the majority of people do not know what's going on. And they don't, and it's being offered at times so people are usually at work or they can't get babysitters. I just don't think enough has gone out to the public. And what else? So yeah, if we do development, it would be nice to see really affordable homes done and maybe some co-housing options instead of the same old broken system that we have that nobody can afford. When I came to the Wyra wrap up, you can cut me off anytime you want. We were actually looking for a plot of land that we could build a little eco house on and work from home and not be a burden to the planet. And what happened is that either the property's too big or it's too small. So we ended up having to buy a house that we thought, okay, well, it's a rural area, 600 meters from Greytown, it's perfect. Every day for 5 years I've been saying, seems too good to be true. Well, it was too good to be true. We might have, God knows what, 1,400 houses being built all around us. And now we're gonna have residential rates. So I've put like $300,000 into this property and house to make it, you know, sustainable. Septic tank, solar panels, a bore, you know, not a burden on the land. And now I'm just gonna possibly be surrounded with 1,400 homes. If we do get surrounded by 1,400 homes, I really hope that we have some developments that people can afford to buy and that it'll be healthy and it'll be done smartly. And I'm all for that. So I don't mean to come in like sour grapes and complain. That's not what I'm here for, but I feel this has just gone through so quickly and so few people know about it. The majority of people that I've talked to do not know about it. And the only people that are for it are the ones that want to subdivide and just make money. So again, it's just like greed. And I'm sorry, you guys, the developing that's been going on in Greytown is not really sustainable and it's not affordable. So, you know, I hope if it all goes through, it'll be something to be proud of and, you know, won't create more burden on our planet. Thank you for listening.
Great. Okay, questions from councillors? I would start out with one. I'd be interested to know what extra consultation we could have done because to my knowledge, every house was given a copy of this through the midweek mail, as well as the other ads that we put in. And we actually had 2 to 3 times more submission than any other council in the Wellington region. It's confirming that we do actually have a pretty good level of engagement. What more do you think we should have done?
Okay, that's a paper. I don't think, you know how you send out your invoice to be paid with rates? Send it to people's address. Not everybody gets a handout. I don't get a handout. I don't get the mid-weekly. I just happen to pick it up.
Oh.
And how many people have actually made submissions?
We've had over 700.
Okay, I was told.
Yeah, no, so that would be Marston.
No, the spatial plan was.
Spatial plan was 200, but
The other
the two-
That's what I'm talking about.
but the 2 were delivered at the same time. Yeah. So anyway, I'm not going to argue about that. I
200
just,
out of how many?
700.
So we had 800 on the LTP, 800.
800 on the LTP, and of that, another 200 submitted.
Out of how many people?
12,000 total. Or,
My point. My point.
yeah.
People don't know about it. Honest to God, everybody I've talked to, there's such a
Okay.
small amount of people that know about it.
We're going to disagree on that one. Right, so
Well, it's a fact.
councillors, and now it's up to other questions.
Thanks, Dr. Just a quick question. Have you ever experienced flooding around the Yorkshire? Experienced any flooding in that area?
Once on my property, but up the street, yes.
So that's why you're suggesting it's not the allocation. That's something I think we're going to be looking into. Just a question, have you spoken yet to some of the questions brought up in the L2? Would you like to talk about that?
We are down to 30 seconds. So.
Oh, okay, right.
Just a qualifying question. Hi, Dawn. I live in Greytown as well. When you say flooding up the road, do you mean towards Papawai or do you mean towards the main street? So
On
flooding
Papawai towards Baby.
right. So in that
And our property did flood once.
okay, cool. In 5 years.
We have heard this before.
Yeah, so just very quickly, you understand that the council has a requirement to provide land for the future. So what I'm getting from your presentation is not so much about opening up land for development, which we actually have to do, but it's more about the planning that goes into how the houses are built and the affordability of those houses. Would that be a fair comment?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So yeah.
For all over the country.
So that's more involved in what's the word? The master planning of how houses are built and the balance of those houses, as opposed to the land that we've said this is where we could see development occurring into the future.
Which is why I suggested that website. That looks like some pretty good research.
Yeah, so what you're proposing is very much what we're talking about in the longer term, about how do we build houses sustainable, but I just wanted to clarify that with you.
Dawn, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've now got Matthew Wills. This was submission 605 and the long back. Welcome, Matthew. So we've got your submission in front of us. So got 5 minutes. We'll leave this out.
So I'm Matthew Wills. I am an independent access contractor for CCS Disability Action throughout the central region. So our submission is basically focusing on access and access issues because we believe that there should be a high level of priority for all council plans and projects because 25% of the population now identify as having a disability or impairment. Disabled people can experience material hardship more than their peers and are more likely to say their housing is unaffordable. For these people who are usually on fixed incomes, increases to council services will add pressure. Many already struggle to pay for the basics of net and electricity and may not be able to adequately feed their families or pay for transport options on what remains. In addition, we believe with the ageing population, this adds significantly to the number of people with mobility, vision and hearing needs. We would like to have the voice of disabled people represented right across all areas of council policy, particularly when considering major new projects through collaboration and co-design. We would like councils to continue to provide mobility parking and often actually increase the level of mobility parking, especially in new builds and developments, especially when new facilities and properties are being considered by councils. Under the new urban unitary plan regulations, there are actually no provisions for mobility parking requirements or mobility or parking requirements in general. So there will be an increased demand for these when it comes to public parking. The demand for accessible housing is increasing and there is little, if any, stock available. If housing is designed with universal design principles, It will benefit all people. Council are able to influence housing design by considering incentives in the consent process. Removing barriers and improving access ensures everyone can contribute and participate. Accessibility is an ongoing goal. There is always room for improvement, especially as new and innovative approaches are always being developed.
Cool. Excellent. Councillors, do you have any questions?
I do. Thanks, Matt. So are you, one of the conversations that we've had around the table today is if we're looking at sizes of houses, for accessibility would be a big thing for disabled people. So can you just point us towards any design standards or other information that would be helpful for us to consider in our deliberations?
CC's Disability Action actually have a or part owner company, which is Lifetime Design. So they do builds from new and also some alterations, but I believe it's mainly from new. So that will actually help councils ensure that the building standards are being met under, I think it's said 4121, but I can certainly find out some more information for you around that. But I'll just guide council towards maybe looking at the principles of universal design, like particularly in housing developments, because that will actually ensure that the houses are built to an accessible standard to start off with, which is obviously going to benefit everybody across the board.
That's spot on. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I understand there's various things, and one part of that might need to go to the combined district plan on the rules with regards to building of new houses. But with regards to accessibility and public buildings, to make this quick, for the South Warra in particular, where do you think the pinch points are on what's provided versus what you want to see provided?
I'd just like to congratulate the council, because I did notice in your long-term plan, one of the biggest things is, I guess, kind of working with Footpaths. So in my role, because I'm an independent access contractor, I'm going to support council and maybe even look at Footpaths for accessibility, and just to consider full access for everybody with mobility needs, because it's right across the board. I mean, it might be for scooters, it might be for people with power chairs, but I mean, just as the population ages, I think it's quite important that that engagement happens, because obviously if we get it right the first time, hopefully.
Right, thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
And I think it's pretty complete what you've given us in the submission. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Can I say something quick?
Yep.
Matt, just before we go, both Alistair and I in the last 12 months have been in wheelchairs and crutches and on knee scooters and have suffered injuries as a consequence of so because we're not used to using them, but it also gave us a remarkable insight into what mobility looks like, and we are incredibly motivated to try and make sure that mobility is looked after, because people's needs change as much as people have those ongoing needs as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess kind of particularly with the ageing population too, it's because more and more mobility issues might pop up. People don't necessarily know when they're going to experience a mobility issue. So
So much for the time and submission.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Well, now move on. Thank you, Councillor Potts, who are now way behind. I'd just like to acknowledge that Councillor West has joined us via Zoom. Hello, Brenda, how are you? Do let us know if you want to ask a question. It's now David Stevens. This is submission number 609 on long term. minutes, and we'll bang again on 4 minutes to let you go.
It won't take that long. My name is James David Stevenson, known as David. I'm a former agricultural consultant and valuer. I live with my wife at 143 Papawai Road. We've lived there for 40 years. In that time, it was bare land when we first purchased the property. It is in the spatial plan for future development. In that time, we developed a small orchard, about 7 hectares of apples and nashi. Unfortunately, in the late 90s, the industry imploded and we had to exit the industry. We still own about 3.6 hectares of land as a lifestyle block. We farm around 40 lambs each year, and I've reared a number of calves as well. So whilst we generally support the proposed spatial plan, my main concern is that there is a large sector of prime agricultural and horticultural land within the area that's designated. And whilst I accept that coming east of Greytown is logical and that the sewage is there and it's easy to put in services, there is a conflict between urban and rural and the land use changes. So what I would urge council to seriously consider is maximising the yield of the urban subdivisions that come up, making sure that you get best bang for the bucks in terms of rates. The developer is encouraged to intensify the land use so that as many residences are extracted from each parcel of land as it comes up. I also believe that these the 4 hectare subdivision limit should be abolished. I consider it a complete and utter waste of land resource. All too often I see sections coming up for sale, people looking at lifestyle as a way of life, getting on the land and not knowing what the hell to do with it. And it's just a complete and utter waste. So those are my thoughts. The other issue that I'd just like to voice my concern about is the recycling centre in Greytown, and we don't want to see it go. If council is determined to use that for other purposes, I think we need to look at alternatives that are suitable for us ratepayers that continually use it. One option I did see that maybe of interest is down in Queenstown. Is recycled bins are very well made, clearly obvious for people to use, and if they're managed successfully by council staff, that could be an option. In Queenstown Centre, these are spaced quite neatly down to within 100 metres apart. So they're not obtrusive, they provide service to the public, and could be an option.
Councillors, do you have any questions?
Oh, pretty well covered it, David.
Short and sharp.
No, not really.
Thank you. We are finding common themes amongst the feedback we've had from the hundreds and hundreds of submitters. So thank you very much for your
Yeah.
I don't know if S. Gregory is here. And also we've had it. So actually we have a bit of a gap because of 2 no-shows. I don't know if Lisa's here yet. She's
No.
not. In which
Can't see the
case,
bride here.
I will we can just pause for 15 minutes until we get through to Lisa arrives. Everyone?
Yep.
And then it goes all quiet again. Hi, guys.
Don't worry about it.
Who is that lady? Lisa, if you're ready, come up. I'm sure you know how, and Frank as well. I'm sure you know how to 5 minutes. I'll give you a warning and with 1 minute to go. We do have your submission in front of you.
Cool, thank you very much. So good afternoon. Thank you for your time. As ever, I acknowledge the challenges you face sitting on that side of the table. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lisa Cornelison. My husband Frank and I own Martinborough Top 10, which operates on reserve land leased from council. I also served as chair of the community board in Martinborough for 6 years, as a member of the Wahinga Charitable Trust, and have chaired both Destination Wairarapa and the Holiday Parks Industry Association in the last 10 years. So firstly, we need to talk about short-term holiday rentals. And arguably, there isn't actually a physical housing shortage in Martinborough. There's around 200 whole houses available for short-term rental on Airbnb. They're just not available for people to live in, which is ironic, given that the people who stay in Airbnb come to Martinborough for an experience which relies on workers who are increasingly unable to live here. This lack of understanding of Airbnb is important. If we need 260 to 280 new homes for full-time residents over the next 30 years, how many new houses do we actually need to build if a proportion of those houses will be diverted into short-term rental Airbnb style accommodation? We need to have a balanced, open conversation about Airbnbs as a community. On the upside, the business they bring into town and the jobs that they create. Less desirable, their impact on housing affordability, social cohesion and community. There's no chance to get to know your neighbours if they change every weekend. Council needs to ask itself when a good old Kiwi batch becomes a commercial accommodation business, and in my view, we need to treat them accordingly. If you don't have the tools you need, maybe we need to start lobbying central government to provide them. We're in the midst of a housing crisis and they're looking for solutions. I was waiting for the spatial plan with anticipation. In light of the acceptance of the majority, as stated in your plan, that growth is necessary, families leaving Martinborough for more affordable towns, and a recognised lack of housing for key workers, this seemed the perfect opportunity for council to deliver a bold plan for this community. Looking at the detail of the plan, I felt only disappointment. I imagine those desperately seeking rental accommodation or looking for affordable quality family housing felt an awful lot worse than I did. I've seen friends and colleagues close to tears over their current housing situation who are despairing at the lack of council action in this plan for Martinborough. As a business owner, I provide housing for one of my team. I've lost other team members who've moved to cheaper towns, and I've employed from the Hutt Valley because key workers can't afford to live here. This plan won't change any of that, in my view. There is no provision to increase mid-density housing other than relying on those who live in area MD to subdivide. That's the same strategy that we've been relying on in Martinborough for over 10 years, with the resulting housing crisis that we're experiencing now. Personally, I want to live and work and run a business in a community that values its full-time residents and that acknowledges the fact that the people who work here should be able to live here. I want to live in a community that's affordable for young families. I appreciate the vibrancy families bring to Martinborough. I don't have children. If I did, I would want to live in a community that they could afford to buy or rent a house to raise their families in. This housing plan for Martinborough will deliver more of what we've already got. And whilst I accept that some people will be more than happy with that, I'm not. And I would hope to think that you as councillors would not be happy with that either. We need Area MF released for mid-density housing now, not at some unspecified time in the future. And council needs to acknowledge the impact of short-term Airbnb style accommodation when discussing the lack of housing in Martinborough. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to answer any question.
Good timing. We have a minute left. And before I start, Lisa, I take on point the fact that this spatial plan, given in the current conditions, won't affect affordable housing. However, this is a problem that even the government hasn't managed to fix over the last 10 years. What is your, do you have a solution for us to fix affordable housing?
I mean, I guess I look at a kind of a 6-unit motel that needs resource content versus an Airbnb in town that can take 12 people, and I don't actually see much difference. In fact, I'd rather live next door to the motel because I can finally own it quite easily. What's not going to solve the issue is not opening up any more land for mid-density. That's definitely not going to solve the issue. And as I said, I mean, I talk to people around town. We are in the midst of a housing crisis in this town, and the only movement we're going to see is a tiny bit of subdivision if that happens right in the centre, and some people leaving mid-density move out towards Oxford Street, and that's, I just don't see what that's going to achieve or deliver in terms of more housing or affordable housing for anyone, whatever your budget income.
Yeah, we have a staff member that she's got 3 kids, a husband and 3 kids, and they need to move to a bigger house. They can't afford to move to a bigger house to release the quarter-acre house, the quarter-acre section house that they've got. That would, if that becomes available back, that's too small for them. If that becomes back available to the market, that helps that. But their only solution is now to either move into Masterton or try and live within the space.
I think we accept that, as I would accept that, but we still have no one has found a solution. So,
Lisa, thank you for that. Next year, we've committed to doing a rating review across the district, and that may well be an opportunity for you to present on solutions with Airbnbs, for example. So I certainly encourage you to come to that next year and put some thought into that maybe and compare it to that. But you raise a really interesting. Difficult solution.
You'll see me again, I'm sure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Right on the money.
Thanks, Debbie.
John Norton. John. Thank you, John. We are running ahead of time, but it's nice to have that. This is submission number 649, John Walsh on the long-term plan. Go for it.
Mr. Mayor and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to talk to your long-term plan. I want to comment on the ongoing practice or policy of underfunding the Three Waters infrastructure renewals. I'm speaking from the information contained in your consultation document, and I've taken all the figures and my questions and my comments from there. Before I start, I am guessing that the accumulated deficit on infrastructure renewals over the last 20 years is around $20 to $30 million. Is that a figure that is in the right ballpark? You're understanding that this is a long-term deficit that is built up, and we're now paying for it with brittle infrastructure. In your climate change challenge notes, you say contingency has been built into asset plans and budgets. There's no evidence of that in the LTP, and this is my point for you to consider. I'm seeking that you reconsider how you approach this whole question. There's no evidence of this in the LTP, quite the opposite in fact, and you are in some danger of misleading your residents. We know our water systems are brittle and lack resilience. We know that. I couldn't water my veggie garden over the height of the summer. I see a $500,000 operational budget increase in your budget to cover the increasing failures that you're having. The 20% maintenance increase to cover ongoing failures, a result of brittleness, a result of years of neglect. We know the water systems are brittle because we see your water company seeking $27 million over the next 3 years to deal with it. $20 million to address core renewals, $7 million to recover resilience. happens over a lifetime events. It costs around 5 or 6% to provide for at the design stage. It costs many, many times that if you don't provide for it. Our water systems have lost their resilience and it needs to be recovered. And the water company is seeking that. Your water company is seeking $27 million over 3 years, 20 million for core renewals, as I repeat, 7 million to recover resilience. Please don't confuse resilience with climate change. Resilience is an inherent property of the systems. Your response: we do not consider this level of investment to be affordable. We do not consider this level of investment to be affordable, and yet your water systems are brittle and are failing. I ask you to reconsider how you deal with this. Who will pay for it? It's unaffordable. Who will pay for this? Our grandchildren? Is this your legacy to your grandchildren? To leave them with infrastructure that is failing and costing more and more? The maintenance cost will keep on going up because the systems are now no longer resilient. Your proposed solution of 17.8 million over 3 years is $3 million per year short. This is a huge challenge. I'm not suggesting it's simple or easy, but it is a challenge. It does not even cover the core $20 million for renewals. There is zero in there for resilience and zero in there for climate change. It continues the policy of underinvestment that you note has been going on for 20 or 30 years. Somehow it must be addressed. This is poor policy and bad management. There are 4 elements to the 3 waters dilemma. There are the core renewals, there's the recovery of resilience, there's the addressing climate change, which is coming and booming and will cost a lot of money. And there are the national policy statement on urban development and the related freshwater standards that are coming, all to be dealt with. You're not even covering the first of these 4, and it will continue to become a difficulty. We urge you to rethink this issue. We do not consider this level of investment to be affordable. It's not an appropriate answer. Thank you.
John, thank you. You haven't had time for questions, so but thank you for your suggestion.
Thank you.
Sutherland, this is Pete Williams. This is Pete Sutherland. This is submission number 143 under this name.
Mayor, councillors, thank you for the opportunity. My submission is in relation to the spatial plan for Greytown only. It's proven that excessive land use regulation will distort land prices for development, developed land. The New Zealand Government Social Policy Evaluation and Research Unit reported on this in 2017 with their quantifying the effect of land use regulation. Because of this, I believe the council, as presented by the council, I do not believe the proposal for the spatial plan for Greytown into Area GB is the best option available. The majority of community feedback was not in favour of large extensions to town boundaries. Despite this, Area GB presents the largest extension of any of the proposed growth areas. Area GA is also presenting a large extension, albeit to a slightly less extent than Area GB. Area GC, although apparently discounted as a growth option by the analysis undertaken, is the area that presents the least expansion of Greytown's current urban boundaries without significantly altering the Greytown's current layout. Area GC is today's own rural special, but it is not rural in character. With the exception of the Pinehaven Orchard area, GC is already residential or urban in nature, comprising of predominantly mid-residential to outer residential lifestyle lots. Because of this, growth in area GC could be accommodated while respecting the already established town country margin created in this area and without altering Greytown's existing character. Specifically in relation to soil classes in area GC, There's been a lot of passionate discussion about soil classes in general, and which area GC is made up of soil class 1. However, in my view, the view is largely irrelevant for the area of GC, because with the exception of Pinehaven Orchards, the area GC has already been subdivided into lot sizes that are insufficient to support or generate a household income from primary production activities. The inability to conduct economically feasible primary production activities negates the relevance of soil class considerations when considering area GC suitability for future development. To ensure there is competition for development, which will assist with reducing land price inflation and market distortions, there is a need to ensure that multiple sites are available for development. I submit that the spatial plan would be substantially improved by redefining areas GA and GB so that they are less expansive, and by incorporating all of area GC into area GF. By providing all landowners in these areas the opportunity and flexibility to develop their land within council guidelines, this would satisfy landowners' desires to develop their land while meeting Greytown's future growth needs. It will provide the most opportunity to keep land price inflation in check, and it will also provide the best opportunity for a wide variety of lot sizes and housing types as the community has requested.
Thanks for time. Councillor, do you have any questions?
What, GD, what was your summation on GD?
Sorry, one GD.
GD is Woodside.
Woodside, yeah. Personally, I'm not in favour of it at the moment. I believe that what is around Greytown at the moment should be fully developed before progressing out to area GD.
Before?
Yes. I see that if the desire is to make it an entirely separate town, that's a different story versus it making it a satellite of Greytown. I don't think that's been properly explored or discussed.
Thank you.
Just in terms of GC and that being included for additional development, what kind of appetite do you think there is from existing landowners to further subdivide their land?
Personally, I speak for myself. I'm GC. I think the largest non-subdivided piece of land at 1.7 hectares, apart from the Pinehaven Orchards. I have an appetite for that subdivision. I have spoken to a number of my neighbours who also have an appetite for further division. So I think there is some appetite there. I don't speak for a large number of them, obviously.
Tom, to ask.
Yeah, sure.
So just in regard to that, is your wish to subdivide the land, is that based on potential for, I don't want to track you the question here, so I'll reword this. Are you able to use your land productively now? So is the subdivision as a consequence of not being able to use your land the way you maybe wish to?
It's of insufficient size to generate a sufficient income from without using a significant portion of my time.
No, that's fair enough. We just wanted to check that. Some others have said similar things as well.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Submission, thank you.
Just a quick catch up. Is yes, Gregory here was going to be speaking at 154? No? Now we're well ahead of time, but Elaine, are you ready to submit early? If we this is Elaine Sutherland, submission number 660 for the LT. Welcome, Elaine.
Hi,
We have 5 minutes and we'll give you a tap at 4 minutes to let you know. We do have your submission in front of us though, so if you just possibly speak to the highlights.
Okay, you being fellow councillors, my name is Elaine Sutherland, already introduced me. I live off Freighter's Road in Southdown subdivision. I would like to speak on decision number 2, which proposes to remove funding for rural road seal extension. I oppose option 1 and support option 2, which is to keep the annual budget for rural road seal extensions. I was going to go on to explain, but I think you all understand that the NZTA used to contribute 50%, council the other 50%, and since NZTA removed their funding, it's left up to council to cover 100% of the cost. As a result, the length of ceiling extensions continue to reduce to the current figure of 1 kilometre per year. I believe that once funding is removed by council, it will not come back, and history tells us that. NZTA have never reintroduced their funding for new roads. With the increased number of rural subdividers creating many more rural lifestyle blocks, there will be even more need to continue with the little amount of sealing done each year. And any reduction to sealing will impact more people in the future. We will never make progress in this area if the funding is to be removed for 3 years and possibly forever. Subdividers of lifestyle blocks contribute $7,000 to council per lot towards roading. So I believe some of this one-off income should or could be put towards the cost of seal extensions. Reducing seal extensions does not just impact on the comfort of the journey. There is serious wear and tear to vehicles from travelling on gravel roads every day, especially when the grading isn't done frequently enough to reduce corrugations. Also, vehicles can get caught in the loose gravel and slide off the roads, causing damage to vehicles and, more importantly, potential injury to people also. It appears that decision number 3 would be the recipient of the savings made by removing seal extensions from the council budget, as the existing rural funding will in effect go to the funding of urban footpaths and curbs. Rural lifestyle block developers and owners have to fund the installation of power, water and sewage, which is in addition to the roading contributions. Not only do they put this infrastructure in at their own expense, but the ongoing servicing of this infrastructure is paid for by the lifestyle owner. I accept rural dwellers do not pay rates for these services either, but as this is all funded and serviced privately, rural people don't want to lose what little they currently get. My suggestion would be to charge urban developers more at the time they subdivide to cover the cost of footpaths and curbs in the towns, rather than taking funding from the rural sector to pay for this cost. Anyone have any questions?
Sure. Councillors, do you have the questions?
No, except I agree.
Elaine, I bet this is overall. I mean, we've still got 261 kilometres of seal. And to seal it all is probably in the tune of about $104 million, which I don't think is outside. Given that you've got 261, how do you prioritise who gets what where? Because we're not talking about not sealing dangerous corners or bends or slopes or anything. We're just talking the straight extension of our seal.
I thought council did have a list where they prioritised, you know,
We
who
have,
was next on the list.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just think that that should continue as it currently does, and just work our way through it. It's better to, you know, do a little than none.
Right.
So like the
Wasn't you being told?
the proposal is that the proposal is to cut the 1 kilometre ceiling extension, not the safety of the corners and so on. So that will still go ahead.
Yeah.
Would you accept then that if so we've heard a lot of submissions at the moment saying carry on with Ruakākā to sort of kilometre by kilometre. Would it not be, from your point of view, would it be better to throw that extra kilometre into the safety part? So instead of doing just the safety, we get another kilometre of safety improvements across our rural roads.
Yeah, I mean, that's another way of looking at it. I mean, safety is.
We'd go further for more people, wouldn't it?
I think it's a harsh one to ask you to answer.
Understood.
Well, we have to answer it.
I think they're both important, but I can see what you're saying.
With your comment about having the register of the roads, I think safety should be a priority.
Yes.
And then work our way down the list.
Yes.
Elaine, thank you for your submission.
Thanks, Elaine.
So we're still running ahead, so we can be a bit more, as we had been relaxed on the 5 minutes. But Ray, would you like to speak early? Do you feel like coming up 10 minutes early?
10 minutes early. I'm going to arrive in time. I swap my clothes when I was not here.
Never, Ray.
So this is a submission from Ray, Lily, 259 on the LTP, and then followed by 6 from the dark sky. Would you like to do yours together or separate?
We'll just run them.
We'll do 10 minutes, so you've got 10 minutes to speak on both. We'll give you a double tap at 2 minutes to go, and then another tap at 1 minute to go. So,
Right.
welcome.
And then I'll throw something at you.
Thank you very much, Your Honour. And
You're on. You're not going to jail, Ray.
make a good judgment. I was very interested, just passed to me before I came in the door, to read the analysis by officials of the submissions, and to see that of the 65 submissions relating to rural road sealing, 52 do not support the withdrawal of funding. In other words, 52 support the continuation of the program. Equally, a really surprising fact to me is that 20 of the submitters supported continued investment in Ruakok-Petuna Road. And Ruakok-Petuna Road is in fact the particular reason that the Dark Sky Reserve Group is here to recommend that the part of the road which was actually, as I understand it, the very next one on the sealing agenda to be done, i.e. the first that's going to be cut if this proposal proceeds, is the one which has the most impact in terms of the Dark Sky Reserve. I think you've seen my submission, of course, and understand what's involved, but just to recap it briefly, there at Starfield, on that first 1.2 kilometres of Ruakok Road, there are currently 3 completed observatories for astronomy and 3 further ones that are underway, which will make a group of 6 observatories for astrophotography, for astronomy, for observation and so forth. That's the only cluster of such facilities that we have available for the Dark Sky Reserve at this stage. No doubt there are going to be others in developments of other ways, but to my mind, the clear indication is that Starfield, once normal activities resume, and I'm talking about tourism, will be a very important element, at least in the first stages. It's the closest thing we have in this economic opportunity to a facility like Tekapo has with Mount John. Significant dark sky, beautiful seeing, as astronomers call it, but plagued terribly by the constant traffic on the road, and thereby the dust on the mirrors, the dust in the electronic equipment, and that can't be avoided unless we seal the road, because those observatories sit open to the sky. So every time a truck or a car or a vehicle of any kind goes up or down the road, they get a coating of it on highly polished, highly sensitive equipment. I can't think of a more destructive effect, frankly, on an astronomy mirror than a consistent, continual coating of dust. And when I talk in my submission of about $1 million worth of this equipment sitting there, being coated in dust 20 times a day, it becomes a fairly awful prospect, frankly. And I can certainly understand John Whitby's chagrin and concern and almost devastation at the prospect that the sealing program won't proceed. We certainly share that with John, who was one stage a member of our group setting up the Dark Sky Reserve. Certainly, the Dark Sky Reserve will need in its early stages the best facilities we can muster. And the fact that the Wellington Astronomical Society, the Wairarapa Astronomical Society, and a separate and private individual are all putting in facilities there, big observatories, significant equipment in them. One of these individuals is going to be operating entirely robotically from somewhere in Singapore. That's how keen he is on that particular site for an observatory he can put anywhere in the country. I don't want him to be disappointed by the council saying, excuse me, we can't be bothered, we can't afford to see the road. I think it's one of those must-dos.
Yeah, can I just butt in there? And I think too, because this project has gone ahead because of the previous submissions to LTP's annual plans regarding the sealing of Ruakukatuna Road, and we understood that there were safety aspects, and I heard you talking about safety aspects before, and the bit that has been sealed, but this was definitely for economic benefit and acknowledged. And also it now that road goes to the chasm, which is getting more and more tourists, and it also goes to the core of the Dark Sky into the Aorangi Forest Park. So it is a key road for, I believe, economic development in the South Wairarapa. So I think you've got our message pretty strongly there. I don't know, we'll do questions later, but the other thing that we probably need to get onto is the Dark Sky submission regarding funding going forward. I think it's pretty clear what we are looking at doing, and this will be, as we talked about yesterday at the combined council meeting, this will be making sure that the reserve status is actually being able to be complied with. So we need someone who has got the skills to actually be able to go out and keep that reserve status going with the monitoring, all of the other stuff that I said yesterday. Carterton has approved part funding, so we haven't actually got the details of what they have said, but we believe that Carterton is happy to share the funding for this person and doesn't want to have to employ them. So over to South Wairarapa now, really, to hopefully be able to come up with the other half of the budget. And as we say in there, once we go into Masterton, that will be shared out, and Regional Council has also given us an indication that Dark Sky reserves fit with their work and would be looking at doing some work around biodiversity and all of those sort of things. So hopefully we can get a bit more funding to do some more things through them as well. But this is initially from now on, once after next month, when the plan change goes through and the application goes in August, then once reserve status has been found, we need to keep that reserve status up, otherwise it's wasted. So, any questions?
Yeah, I can start. So with regards to, we put aside Ruakuk Road just for a minute, just forget a bit about that today. But with regards to long-term planning funding for Dark Sky Society, you're looking at, is it a 0.5 FTE shared between two councils, or is it a 0.3?
Probably, it would be probably 0.5.
0.5? And then,
maybe a little bit less.
And then 13,000 split.
No, that would be, if there were three options there. So we could employ the person and do that for that amount of money, we believe. So that's number one.
Yep.
Or otherwise, South Wairarapa and Carterton at the moment employ a staff member part-time to do that. But as the society holding the actual certification, it may be better, we think, that to actually have the person working for the society and then not having to be worried about council, not having to worry about it, somebody else is managing it for them.
Any questions?
Yeah, well, you've laid it out pretty simple here for us to understand. Thank you for that. I guess the big thing we've got to consider is, as you well know, comes down to numbers, but I mean, the support of the Council for Dark Sky is there, so, you know, it's going to grow, you know that.
Can I, do you anticipate that your coordinating committee will be a standalone economic unit eventually? Are we looking at a long-term thing, or are we looking at seeding capital for 2 or 3 years to get the thing kicked?
I think you have to do this every year if you want to carry on being a dark sky reserve. There's compliance every year, so it will have to be ongoing as far as that's concerned. I can't see them unless they change, IDA change, then I can't see it changing.
We have specific reporting requirements placed upon us on an annual basis via the IDA.
I agree. I understand the economic impact is a separate discussion, a separate funding stream.
Yes, yes.
Right. Yeah, Lee, and then
just a quick question. Have you, just thinking about funding, have you looked at the businesses in the dark sky space and see what contributions they might make?
I think it's too early to do that. Once reserve status has come in, and I think Techpo's finding that now, and you've got a bit more of a business base there that is now starting, they need the time to get up and moving too. You don't want to start hitting them with things to be, I suppose, yeah, that are going to requirements for them. So I would say that, yeah, in the future, definitely, but initially, no, I would think you need to encourage them and make sure that that reserve status stays there for them to actually thrive.
But we also have a couple of specific ideas that we would like to develop once we have certification. One of those, for example, is the Dark Sky Friendly project, which we want to involve business right through the whole of the community and have them committed to supporting the Dark Sky initiative, but also providing them with services such as lighting surveys and lighting advice and so forth, in return for them becoming dark sky friendly businesses and making a small contribution towards our running costs. So we're hoping to defray some of the costs that we're going to incur. At the present time, several of my committee colleagues are not very impressed by my statement that I've been forced to put my hand in their pockets and extract a certain amount of capital from them to keep us in business at the present time.
I think too, one of the other things that, as anyone who knows who's done voluntary work, getting someone to do the admin sort of stuff is very hard to get funding for. Projects, events, buying kit, all of that sort of stuff is easy to get, pretty easy to get funding for from outside sources. But the nuts and bolts of what we're having to do post reserve status is this, and unless it's done properly, we would be in jeopardy of losing it, and I would not want to see that happen.
And that's certainly the same difficulty which Jacopo has faced ever since it was given the world's first dark sky reserve status. I was talking with Professor John Pinshaw, the chairman. They don't have any committed funding. They have to go cap in hand to business and other places to continue to exist, frankly, and they're well known. They have a huge visitor base, a lot of business activity, and even so, they are actually on the bones of their proverbial.
Ray, Vince, thank you very much for
Yep. Am I?
Your next one?
Yeah.
Is Martin.
Okay. Okay, so this is my spatial plan, or our, and Martin's got man flu, so he's not here today, sorry. You wouldn't want him. So, as you would imagine, I definitely support the spatial plan, lock, stock and barrel, and congratulate council on giving to where you've got to, so that's really good, thank you. It's very dear to my heart. So definitely support further land for housing in all towns, and we need to do it properly. So I definitely support now, and after being on the as a commissioner, when the combined district plan was actually originally done, there was definitely not an appetite for little sections. Times have changed, and I think now is a good time to actually look at doing some more infilling and those things in all towns. So as far as Greytown, yeah, all towns. I do have concerns regarding the area GB in Greytown, especially from most of the way down Popawai Road. It is very, very wet. The water table is 1 to 2 metres, whereas where we are on the other side of the road, it's 9 to 10 metres. There's always surface flooding around there whenever it gets very wet, and if you're going to put whole heap of houses down there, just beware that there is a lot of stormwater that will have to be dealt with, and how you're going to deal with it. It's quite a big problem. And that was noted in the discussion for future planning when the future development area for Greytown was done, and that area of town and the combined district plan was not going ahead with because of that huge high water table and the problems of development of that for lots of houses. Greytown GC that area is already serviced. It hasn't got a huge number of sections in the plan, but the sizes are the 2 to 4,000 metres sizes are, I think, correct. It gives a buffer to the town from the dairy farms and that are basically on that outside area. It can't, the rural amenity, which I know that some people had talked about in their submissions, can't really be got rid of around there because there's the Applebell floodway that can't be built on. So there's all that northern side of North Road, there is no way that you can build on that. So that's easily sorted for rural amenity. I think that's an easy fix to start off with, whereas the GB area requires a lot more work before you can actually open it up. And the stop bank will protect the area, the new stop bank, once that's done. Woodside, I would not be supportive of any bigger development of Woodside. It just fragments everything. It's bad enough now with 3 towns, how they're different. So making another one would be more problematic. And especially as far as sewage concerns go. I think council, it's good that we're looking at staging, but I think council needs to be looking at ones that can be done reasonably fast because there is a demand there now. And so simple ways of getting infrastructure in as well as doing the infill. And I think the spatial plan needs more robust information. And I noticed today in today's Times Age that the combined plan group is already talking about that very early on in the combined plan review. So I think council needs to take that into the spatial plans, but it needs to happen. So that's it.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much.
I swear. Thank you.
Thank you for hearing us.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, you didn't pass judgment on the road. Then all this time.
I was hoping for this small panel.
Thank you. Is Chris Hodgson here?
Chris is there. Yep.
If you're willing to present earlier, this is submission number 675 from the Hubble long-term. Chris, you have 5 minutes. And we'll tap the thing at 4 minutes to let you know time is running out.
You've all seen me before. If you don't know who I am, you can Google me. I have a question for you. Which of you actually lives on a rural unsettled road?
Not now.
No one. Just when you're thinking about this, just keep it in mind. Every time you go out your gate, you are not met by clouds of choking dust or seas of slippery mud. You don't have a problem keeping your cars clean. You don't have to constantly repair your fences because people have been sliding off into them. Above all, you are reasonably safe. You don't have to back up and down a narrow twisting road to avoid lorries, camper vans, caravans, which I may say council has itself made worse by promoting the camping site at the end of our road as a treat for tourists visiting Greytown, without a single thought for the infrastructure that you are promoting in that way. As for the paper itself, great to improve life in the district, fair enough. The problem, you accurately state, is you haven't spent enough on the roads in the last 4 or 5 years. And the solution is to stop sealing to save money. And how ridiculous can you get? By the way, the figures are nonsense. I have made several inquiries as to the actual cost of sealing the road. The highest I can get, with the proviso that that's an overstatement, is $200 per kilometre. $200,000, sorry, per kilometre. I suspect you've given Fulton Hogan a monopoly position, but I really don't know. But you could easily, by looking around a bit and changing the methods, do a whole lot better. So the options, I heard the word stupid used earlier. I think option 1 is plainly stupid. Option 2 is grossly inadequate. You have to spend now to avoid making it much worse later. What do you think people are going to think of you in 10 years' time when the figures have got far worse than they are now? Already acknowledged. The problem is that you haven't spent enough in the past. But most importantly of all, you finally acknowledge that you have a health and safety duty. It's become fashionable to speak of health and safety lately. Well, I inquired of your chief executive, and he says you have no way of collecting data on safety. So how you can do comparisons, I did not know, other than perhaps starting for the first time to actually listen to residents who live on these roads. As I gave you a letter I wrote in 2007, I think, which I got a stupid answer. I know that there has been interminable correspondence over the years about Malvern Road. I know that nothing whatever has been done, and it's now in a worse state than it ever has been, and will continue to be so. As the chief executive rightly acknowledged to me, in the summer, you grade it, and within 1 week, or at the most 8 days, it is as though it had never been graded. I've suggested in the paper that 10 Ks is the minimum, and that's probably all you can afford, even at half the price you think it's going to cost you. Well, every local body in this country seems to be faced with the same problems. All of them are talking about putting their rates up. Wellington is arguing at the moment about whether it's 11, 13 or 15%. The time is right. You just can't hope for re-election by keeping the rates down. You've got to spend the money and look after the people that live in your district. That's really all I have to say.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor, do you have any questions? Still got a minute. Have you got any questions in front of Chris? Yeah.
Chris, you said that council were promoting the camping ground at the end of Glenmorgan Road. Where has that been promoted, can I ask?
I haven't seen it myself, but I'm told that if you're a tourist coming to Greytown, and there is some council website which says that is the camping ground to go to. And it's a real treat.
Could that be the dog website?
I've no idea.
I'll have a look, but that's lovely, thank you.
Well, what is without doubt happened within the council, the traffic numbers, is that the use of the campsite has increased hugely. Not to mention the more subdivisions we've had along the road. But as I said to you a year ago, some of the vehicles cannot get up there, and the farmer has to tow them up the hill when they're trying to leave the campsite. The road is so bad.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson, do we know? Oh.
Yeah, Chris, just who owns the campsite? Is it?
Well, Tucker. It's a private campsite.
So is he
New
collecting?
Zealand tried to make it public.
Yeah, is he collecting revenue off it? I don't know anything.
$5, which goes to my knowledge to the Salvation Army. $5 per car.
Okay, councillor Eames.
I just did, have you got a traffic count on the road?
Yes, I've given it to the mayor and to the council, and we can update it whenever you like. 400 or 500, I think was the last figure we gave you.
And perhaps I could be a bit provocative, but what is an acceptable rates rise? What is an acceptable rates rise to accommodate additional ceiling?
I don't think you can, well, I'm no expert in council finances. I'm simply quoting what other councils find acceptable. Even thought 13 or 15 for Wellington. I really have no idea because you're starting from what it's actually going to cost. I think you're way out on that.
Any other questions? Chris, thank you very much for your support.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Our next submission is at 3:06. So if adjourn for 15 minutes, not adjourn, we'll just take one.
Listen, I go down occasionally.
To do the extension of time.
Oh, sorry.
And I'll move.
Oh, sorry, I'll just and you can have 10 minutes if you want to combine your submissions. We have read your submission, and we suggest that you do present your key points during the first half of the allotted time and leave time for questions. Submitters are also asked to be polite and respectful, and I reserve the right to terminate a presentation if submitters criticise elected members or staff or are being disrespectful. What I'd also like to do at this point is to council, since this is a meeting, move that we extend actual wording that the long-term plan submissions, hearing and deliberations continue beyond the 6-hour time limit meetings prescribed by the South Wellington District Council standing orders. Do someone move that? Pam, seconded. Thank you, Rebecca. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against? The motion is carried. Jim, would you like to do both presentations for yourself and your partner together? Yep. Right. Thanks. So you'll have 10 minutes. We'll give you 2 taps with 2 minutes to go, 1 tap with 1 minute to go. Go for it.
Okay, I totally agree with your proposal to have urban ratepayers mow their burn. This, as I would understand, this would come from the roading budget. So therefore, in the past, rural ratepayers paid 75% of this. Now, just to get the picture right, in the roading budget is footpaths, street curbing, lighting and street sweeping. Now, that was put in, that used to be all separate and done to urban. Now, urban had all their streets, there was a campaign to get all their streets tar sealed. They got them tar sealed, and in John Reed's time, that was decided to, instead of having it funded as a network, it would be funded as urban would pay for their roads and rural would pay for their roads. But because the expenditure had dropped drastically for urban because they had all their roads tar sealed beforehand, they needed something to balance it up. So they stuck all the footpaths, street curbing, lighting and street sweeping into roading and funded as over the board. So therefore, rural got stuck with those costs on top of the law things. What I'm saying is that that should be taken out and roads funded as a network. That's the roads funded as a network, not as urban pay for theirs and rural pay for theirs, because we each use each other's roads for the same purposes. And I won't go into those. So by putting the
mowing the burn puts it, the cost of that to where it should lay, and that is with the urban ratepayer, and that's doing it themselves. If they don't do it themselves, perhaps they should be charged for the contractor coming around. And I understand, you know, rules have got tougher. You've got to have a man in front and a man behind, and God knows what. Okay. The Footpaths Extension, same thing. Footpaths were stuck into roading when they were separate before. They should be separated. It's an urban function. It's urban who want their kids to be able to go to school, them to walk to the grocery shops, them to go to the parks, all those sorts of things. Rural come along, and they pull up at where they want to go to and cross over and go into it. So, you know, it's an urban function, so it should be done. So I only say that if they want the extensions, it must be urban paying for it. And I think you say in your thing that 50% is paid already by the reserve or something like that. Is that correct? The reserve account, half is reserve account, half is from the ratepayers. So that half that's from the ratepayers should be from urban ratepayers. Roading, as you say, is a challenge. Now, in the document, you say safe roads. Safe roads are a vital element in being able to connect with family and friends. Safe, the thing is, you're making roads unsafe. Just take Harrison Street for an example. You've narrowed the road to 2.8 wide. That's a heavy traffic bypass to the fertiliser depot up at the old Tate Mackenzie's outfit there. A truck is 2.5 wide plus its mirrors. Its mirrors take it out to 3 metres. Now those trees in the middle of those things are going to grow and be out on the road. It forces the driver of the truck to illegally go up that road. He has to be partly in the other lane to get up there. That's illegal. So you're making it illegal for him. And the other thing is only 100 millimetres from the edge of the outside line are these big circled culverts, 100 mil high. It's an accident waiting to happen. Now, on State Highway 2, as you enter from Greytown end, there was signs put up walking into Featherston. Those signs were basically on our property. A very little bit of it was on the roadway. You were made to pull them down because they were a danger, because they stuck up so much, right? These ones, and they were something like 4 metres from the outside white line to them. These are only 100 millimetres from the solid white line. And, you know, to make the comment, you know, is it all about prettiness, not workability? Now, you say upgrades to Harrison Street has changed the shape and feel of the east side of Featherston. Trees and footpaths have lifted the look of the area, and I am really impressed. You know, did you really look at what the effect it is having on traffic? Those trees and that it's very good, but the trees and the big culverts are in the wrong place. They should be on the other side. There's a tar sealed piece that they're in. Then there's a footpath, and the footpath is further away than from the white line than on the roadside end. So they should have been, then there's a drain, they should have been on the other side of the drain in the joker's property. So, you know, you've got to make roads safe. And the other thing is, there must have been at one time a joker got given the job of going around, and you know the signs, you come up to a bend in the road and you have these big bloody signs in front of you with the V, yellow signs with the V in them. Last year I complained about 3 of those. 2 of them one by the Tamari corner and one down a bit further. I spoke to Tim afterwards about that, and he's fixed those, and all it took was one post, the first post, taking out, putting that to the back and shifting the sign back that way. There is still one absolutely dangerous on the other side, on the south side of Kahoutra School. It's only 700 mil from the white line, right? So, you know, roads do need to be made safe, but and whether it was somebody going around just given the job, go and do it, I don't know. But there should be a standard free of structures and so forth, so you've got that runoff period, and so don't have accidents and everything else. And just imagine the accident you're going to have with those somebody hit those concrete rings. Water races. I'm talking about the Longwood water race here. It's getting smaller and smaller with subdivision and so forth. And the subdivision has made it smaller because part would have the water race on it, part would not have. So therefore, the part that doesn't have the water race on it is gone. It's not rated any longer. It is now 4 times dearer to run than Marua. So it's getting that way. It's uneconomic. It is not delivering the outcome it should be delivering to all ratepayers. You know, the ones at the top end get plenty of water. The ones at the bottom end get no water sometimes. So, you know, and they still pay the same amount per land value for that service or non-service. Affordable rates. There needs to be a total review of the rating system. At the present time, the UAGC is not used to its full extent. It needs to be. In actual fact, if you have a look at the rating functions, they are basically for the benefit of the community. So you should be looking at something that puts the cost to the benefit of the community. The community is split 34% rural, 66% urban, even with a UAGC, which is 48% rural, 52% urban. It's not right. So the only way you can do it is you use an AGC, and by using an AGC with a differential population based on population, so 34% rural, the rest urban, 66% urban, you can do that. Now, you've got to be open about this. Now, Footpaths, it was put to me that, or suggested to me, the rural ratepayers got a benefit from Footpaths by having the Tora walk. Those people in turn would come and walk on the urban streets. Well, that's stretching the imagination far too much. You know, so we're to be penalised because we get people into the district, just the same as the Olives get people into the district and to shop at the shops, and we get penalised because of that. That's taking it a step too far. We don't get the benefit from that. You know, a lot of people come in and use the footpaths and so forth. I think you've got to be really honest about it when you're doing it. You know, it can be a complex system. It's a complex system deciding what's public and what's private. But once you have decided what is public and private, it becomes very easy to identify who benefits from the public part. So therefore, who should pay for the public part? And as I say, most of these functions are for the benefit of the people. Now,
thank you, Jim.
I'd just like to make one point. Libraries and cemeteries are funded at the present time on a UAGC, right? That's 48% funded by rural. Only got 34% of the population. How do we get the benefit from those functions for 48%? We don't. Unless we die twice, and then we get from the cemeteries.
Okay, 10 minutes. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions. If there's anything that's not in your submission that you wanted to give to us for consideration, please write it down and pop it in, and we'll use that as part of that consideration as well.
I do hope that you do have a full review of the rating system.
I think if you read the long-term plan, you'll see that it is indeed in there. So
Well, I want to say, I'd just like to say that it was done last time, but it only stopped once you decided when there was a public-private part. You've got to continue it on to find out, once you do a public part, who funds that. Okay, thank you.
We now have submission 128 from Alistair and Diana. Alistair. Okay, councillors will know that this is tabled as additional to the submission.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've been sitting patiently in the back there for a few hours. I'm sure you know the drill, so you get the votes.
Your Worship, councillors, thank you. And I just thought I'd table a short paper, just going to speak to it. It's really a summary of our submission. And as you'll see, there are just two key points I want to emphasise. Before I go to those 2 points, perhaps I should acknowledge I have 40 years experience in planning and resource management. And my wife, Diana, has 25 years as an urban designer, so it may not come as a surprise emphasising these 2 points. Firstly, infill housing. Support infill housing in the ME in a residential, but this must be accompanied, in our opinion, with really robust urban design guidelines, because we don't want to undermine the character of the area. And frankly, from experience, I've seen so many infill developments that change the character significantly. And I just, for example, often walk down Jellicoe Street from our residence in Vintners Lane down to get my coffee, etc. And just next door to R.A. Graham's, a new infill housing development there, and a close to 2 metre high permanent fence. I think we've got to look at our urban design guidelines, and we must, in conjunction with the district plan, have appropriate site coverage, not too intense, good on-site open space, lower fences, permeable, etc. Because otherwise it will change the character. And that would be, I think, most unfortunate. And I just mentioned at the end of that paragraph, also we've got to be very careful about the infrastructure, Three Waters in particular. Sorry for being overly provocative in terms of the photograph, but I just want to say that, in our opinion, and I appreciate your worship, during the Zoom meeting you asked people several times, what do you consider to be the character of Martinborough? This is focused on Martinborough. And I say this, it is inextricably linked to the success of the wine industry in our opinion. And I mean, that started, as I say, back in the 1970s with the Soil Bureau looking at the soils here. They did find them as being very appropriate for viticulture, but they're not versatile soils in terms of land use classification, but they are versatile soils. For example, going outside of this region to Orange Bay, you've heard of the inlet gravels, very good wine growing area, class 7 soils, because they're heavy in terms of stones. So I think we've got to look very carefully, and that's another point I want to make, and that's why I did, again, being a wee bit sort of leading on the diagram on the second page. I know it's dated in terms of some of the names of some of the vineyards, but nevertheless, it just reinforces a point about the success of the viticulture industry in terms of the high terraces. And those soils, even though not first class, I think deserve protection from inappropriate development. And that's where I'm not going to say I disagree with my neighbour who appeared before, Lisa, for example, we're in Vintners Lane, around our neighbour. But I do have a concern about the other growth options, looking at particularly special rural and rural before there's been further consideration. I know it's part of the longer term spatial plan, but we looked at residential, but in isolation from rural. I think they've got to be looked at together. So I'm just saying, please, any final decision through the spatial plan on the residential growth, please put on hold until we have a closer look at the rural sector and particularly how we ensure that the soils that are very appropriate for viticulture are, my words, protected. And I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just in terms of urban design standards, could you point us towards any areas where you think this may have been done that we could look to help inform us?
Certainly now there are a number of district plans that incorporate design guides. They're often the larger metropolitan areas, but I think the principles that are incorporated into those design guides would provide a good framework for an appropriate design guide for Martinborough. And, you know, we often say it's about the external appearance of the building, sure. But I think more importantly, and as I say, linked to the district plan standards and rules, you don't want too high site coverage. You want to ensure there's good level open space, ground level open space. You want setbacks from the front yard, not bringing the fence right up high and, you know, have landscape, etc. So it's a combination. We can certainly be in touch with the planning department if they want some examples.
And I think we've got to wrap that up, but I'm going to just one extra question of you as a planner. We've discussed this quite a lot. Do you feel that master planning is a good way of doing this, or should it be stuck into the district?
Well, I think master planning is a good forerunner to district plan provisions. I know a lot of district plans incorporate master plans and structure plans into the district plan. They sometimes become overly rigid and prescriptive. I think that's something we should avoid because circumstances change. So it's more getting principles in that guide the development rather than some defined plan as such.
Yeah, good. Great. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the time.
Peter and Bruce Smith. This is submission 201 on the spatial plan. Peter and Bruce, welcome. My old neighbours. And Alistair's old.
Spent a lot of time pressed up against you.
Spent a lot of time on his face up on up.
Mr. Mayor, Councillors, Tēnā koutou katoa, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this afternoon. My name's Pete Smith and this is my wife Prue. I'm a sixth generation to manage our farm Waihinga, and my family came to Waihinga, now Martinborough, in the early 1850s. We farmed years on the edge of town, and we have 6.5 k's of Rimahunga River boundary and a 200 hectare farm on the White Rock Road. Our interest today is in our land on the southern end of town, corner of Jellicoe Street and Ferry Road, which is designated MF and the growth options, and it's currently designated special rural. This land is definitely not special. We've had inquiry from vineyards over the years, but no uptake, and mostly we believe to the large iron pan underneath. We've also tried cash cropping here, specifically barley and chickpeas, with disappointing results. And apart from a means to eat grass, it is economically unsustainable economically. We've seen the scoring of the matrix on the assessment criteria for land for food development in Martinborough. The major differences with other development areas were sewage and water, neither to do with the land, apart from being low-lying for the sewage, but more the existing infrastructure in the town. We believe that new builds in town should be encouraged or instructed to use rainwater and grey water, both of which would help with water and stormwater. We also believe that the scale of development that could be placed on this block of this size would justify the building of a pump station for sewage, and we disagree with the special rural score. We can't be doing a subdivision on the southern side of our driveway, which we can cut up into 1 hectare blocks. Get closer to town, we're restricted to 4 hectares. Of course, we could sell these 4 hectare blocks, but they may be lost to the town for future development forever. We believe that the best part of our proposal is that we are one willing owner of a large area of land prepared to work with council. I think that there are already precedents in town with Pinot Grove, Cottage Grove, the Martinborough Estate and Hawkins Drive. Why should we be treated any differently?
The limitations in the zoning could be discouraging investment in Martinborough on a larger scale. For example, cuisine schools, retirement homes, or residential development. One obvious way to get more rateable income is to get more ratepayers. This could be a quick way of achieving this rather than dealing with many landowners with all different agendas on a patchwork development. There is a lack of affordable housing in Martinborough. One way might be to have smaller sections on a well-designed subdivision. We have heard some of the problems with developing the current sections in Martinborough as the safe and acceptable access for emergency vehicles, so design would be key. The creek at the southern end of the area is an obvious option for disposing of stormwater, but also for a green zone planting area and common space. Our vision of development of this area of land is one that I'm sure is shared by council, a space that can be used for residential development that is in keeping with the rural and village feel of Martinborough. So not allowing for this in the upcoming changes is limiting to our town. In summary, we believe that the scoring of land is inaccurate, unwarranted and unfair, and is inhibiting the development of Martinborough. All challenges discussed on the matrix are resolvable. And finally, we affirm that we are one willing landowner with a large tract of land prepared to work with council as soon as possible. We are shovel ready. We just need you guys to get on the same page. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Pete. I think I'll just comment that it was councillors that actually brought up that section as an area that had been left off. And got incorporated into the spatial plan. But one of the issues I had, well, I could say, you could confirm this because you own it, was that it was actually a lot more frost prone than other areas, and that made it probably slightly difficult for vineyards. Is that true, or is that just?
I don't know, we don't spend any time up there first thing in the morning. I bike past here to the gym, but I don't know whether it's more cross-prone to other areas of town. I'm not sure. I know that the vineyard at the end of Free Road down next to us, it's usually the first one to come on with windmills.
Do you know why it was included in the special rural classification back in 2004?
I don't really. I think they just sort of took a broad scope around town and just chucked everything in there.
Yeah, they did. I mean, looking at the combined district plan as we're going through it now, I would revisit it and they just.
Councillors, any other questions?
Yep, what's as big as when it goes down our driveway, but at least 10 hectares up to 15 possibly, depending on we could shoot in the corner a little bit. We don't own all of it down Ferry Road, we only own the first paddock against Jellicoe Street.
Questions?
Thanks for your time. Very nice.
Register we do. By Zoom. So next,
yes.
Next.
Can you hear me?
Yep, thank you, Alistair. Is submission 392 on the long-term plan by Alistair Ramsden by Zoom. Alistair, welcome. We will bang the gavel with 4 minutes to let you know that you have a minute left of your 5. But we do encourage you to leave some time for questions if possible. Go for it.
Sure. Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa, Mr. Alistair Ramsden, Bachelor of Arts, Ahau. As a preamble, my education and skills background is that I hold a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy and Applied Mathematics from University of Auckland, awarded 1993. And since then, I've been employed in the private finance sector and thence the public performance and evaluation sector for 25 years. I live in and am a ratepayer in Featherston. I am passionate about the environmental challenges that face all of humanity and decision-making bodies like South Wairarapa District Council, hence my submission to the long-term plan. Based on NIWA forecasting, which is in turn based on UN IPCC forecasting, by 2050, sea level is likely to rise from 1/2 a metre to 1 metre. Temperature averages are likely to increase 1 degree centigrade to 1.5 degrees centigrade. Days where the daily high temperature is over 25 degrees are likely to double from their current base of approximately 45 days per year. Refugee numbers are likely to more than quadruple from approximately 80 million refugees worldwide to approximately 380 million refugees worldwide. The weather in the Wairarapa will likely be overall drier, including more variation, more deluge, more drought, 10% windier, and salination of pastoral aquifer is also likely to become a significant issue. So what? South Wairarapa District Council long-term planning ought to prepare to and face these issues along with all other branches of government. This is an everywhere in government problem. I am an advocate for James Lovelock's concept of sustainable retreat. This includes both mitigation, fixing issues that can be fixed, and adaptation, walking away from issues that cannot. Hence, I excite South Wairarapa District Council to think globally and act locally. For instance, buildings need to be built for future climate. South Wairarapa District Council ought to retreat from sea roads and sea walls. South Wairarapa District Council ought to plan to turn Lake Wairarapa into a mangrove swamp sea inlet. And finally, and I think I mentioned this explicitly in my submission, South Wairarapa District Council, along with the rest of government, should engage in electrification of rail lines. Thank you for your time.
Right, thank you very much. Councillors, do we have any questions of Alistair? Yeah, Councillor Maynard.
Thank you very much, Alistair, for that proposal. I was just wondering what made you choose mangroves for the Lake Wairarapa?
Because Lake Wairarapa will be inundated and will not be fresh water, it will be salt water. And there's nothing we can do to stop that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? That's it. Alistair, thank you very much for your submission. We are running ahead of time now, but we will stop for afternoon tea. We'll reconvene back at 4 o'clock. Thank you very much. And just checking, Brenda, are you still there? She's asleep. No, no, she's too sound off.
Thanks, Brenda.
I'll reconvene this council meeting. Or just adjourn. Right, today, now have submission 685 from Magatani on Wairarapa. Tira, would you like to? We have 5 minutes, and we'll give you a warning when it's 1 minute to vote. We have got a submission in front of us, so we'll release the time for questions.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Ko tira mara te tauahau o ngā uri o Wairarapa no Ngāti Kahunu me Rangitāne o Wairarapa. Ko Papawai te marae, ko Manihira me Pūhara te tau, o Kititana. Ko Ngāti Moe te hapu, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for having us here today, and I would like to acknowledge my whanaunga here that are here in support of this submission today. Some of the key points that you may have seen on this is that we are pretty, Rangitāne of Wairarapa are all about wanting to our climate change. In fact, we need to look at other ways. There are Indigenous solutions that could help us, and maybe that's where we can work better and more efficiently with each other. I believe that recognising climate change and the fundamentals of conserving waste and water, we all know that with the 3 waters and the RMA changes, they will deeply affect not just our Māori whanaunga, but also some of our own traditional practices as well. And we want to be a part of those discussions. We need to be a part of those discussions, and that means right through to the hapu and marae level. And although iwi can disseminate the information, it's really key to have those relationships with the whānau that are on the ground doing the mahi in terms of water monitoring, looking at ways that we can work better together. There's also a mention of how we are supportive of the Māori liaison role, and would like to say congratulations to actually forward thinking about this. We do understand that the Māori relationships are going through really changeable times, and we need somebody who can be on the ground. Now, we do want to up the budget on that from the 90k to 150k, because we do know that there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And the relationships with iwi and that Māori liaison person or persons, because I believe it should actually have a teamwork to wrap around and help uplift and give this council a more cultural competency than it has before. And that's just from our perspective as iwi in the engagement process. Matariki, I would like to actually bring this as part of an event that we know is being done in the northern Wairarapa districts, but we haven't got one here for our southern Wairarapa. You know, effectively, it would be great to have an event. I know Dark Skies is around, but having a Matariki event that would encourage tourism, economic benefit to the South Wairarapa is something that would be key, and that we'd be wanting to look to support our marae and hapu around this area to do, and would look for councils support in those events. Matariki, as you know, is over a period of time, so you choose when that would look like for you to educate, to support our marae, to educate about Matariki. We can then celebrate our own holidays, you know, with our own unique story. So I would like to encourage council to look at this as an annual event that you support, and by supporting our marae and hapu to do so. Like I did talk about our climate change and the RMA changes. I also want to ask, how are you going to educate the community on what these impacts would look like for them, albeit it may come in the forms of rates, hikes. There was a bit of a deviant. Hikes, rates, you know, rate hikes, and it may impact on how the quality, especially with our marae, when it comes to water quality, what those impacts are for them, and how much support would be available when council can support through this process when it happens. Because it is going to happen. We all know this, but I don't know how adequately it has been disseminated out to our communities enough about the impacts that could happen. But we all know, I've brought up Māori wards, and we have been very strong about wanting to have a Māori ward. Yes, it's been missed out for next year's election. I would like to see this integrated into the LTP, that by 2025 we would have done this research, and as a forward-thinking council, moving progressively better towards a Māori ward space that will encourage people to have a council that encourages a Māori ward. I don't know what it would look like, but it needs to have that consultation with iwi, marae, hapu, whānau, because it would be up to them who they vote for and put forward for this council. But I also wonder what kind of space that person would be coming into when it comes to your cultural competency for a Māori ward. So by then that would be easier and ideal to actually see that for the future.
Thank you for your submission.
Maybe that's a response back to around that as well. So,
Thank you. We now have submission 683 from the Māori Standing Committee, Rita and Andrea. Good.
Kia ora.
You know, the drill, we have 5 minutes. We'll give you the bang and gavel with 1 minute to go.
Greetings to Alex Lane and fellow councillors, Tēnā tātou katoa, ngā mihi kia koutou, thank you for the opportunity to speak to our submission. Especially I want to acknowledge and thank the Māori Standing Committee for being a part of the process and helping to compile the submission we have before you. When we compiled our submission, we considered our future generations. We were mindful that our job is to create the platforms and framework and identify the priorities their job is to come and pick up the kaupapa and not just carry on, but to supersede us and take it to the next level. So in our submission, when we talk about having and memorial works and access to significant sites and being included in the co-design of infrastructure projects and support for our urupa, we not only consider them on a tangible level, it's about reaffirming ourselves on the whenua again. It's about having our reference points and being visible on the landscape again. Access to those spaces that feed our hauora and wairua. Tinana wairua, he māo, he couple. So I'm talking body, spirit, mind and subconscious. Lastly, the role of the Māori liaison person within the council. This has been a topic for the last 2 years. Even new members catch up really quickly. We talk about it all the time. We agree that the role would need to be done in 2 phases and a transition period. The first phase would need to be someone with experience in this space, probably a 12-month contract. This person would develop an engagement framework, develop Māori policies, i.e. street naming, create cultural competency training and working toward a bicultural organisation. We would start with a transition period, the transition plan towards the end of that contract, and then that individual would transition from phase 1 into phase 2 and take the role. So, do you have any questions?
Take a breath.
If I could start, councillors, and I see Brenda's also got a question there on Zoom, but when we were discussing this and we put forward some allocation for Māori liaison, would you be able to give to the council a bit more of a structure around that 150k that's been requested over and above what we'd initially put in, just so that we know the scope of that and whether or not that's going to fit nicely with
I think what it also means, it's about having some really good investment in Māori and seeing the value that we can bring to the table. So with an individual, there's a role there, there's a job description, but also there needs to be a working budget. There's certain things that this person is going to need to achieve, and they're going to need a working budget to do it.
I think in a written form, just to push that out so we can give that to our CEO to run through so that we can then, with confidence, put that into our LTP.
Well, I was thinking, when we were talking about the submission,
we'll provide that written
breakdown. That's all, just a breakdown to give us a bit more pressure around it.
We haven't really talked about and fleshed it out, just thinking like we need to build this into be sustainable. It's another part of it, and there's so much work to do in it as well. So we might underestimate that, and for that reason, again, we need to make sure that we kept enough money there as a budget as well.
Brenda, go.
Kia ora, Narita. Thank you very much for coming and submitting. My question is around your. Can you confirm with us that you've got ongoing relationships with things like Potamakai and the South Wairarapa, and that you are working with regards to the Matariki celebrations? Can we have a bit of feedback on that?
Yes.
Not that here.
So ongoing relationships, of course, these organisations nominate who they want to sit around that table. No one selects or appoints. And part of our induction is building that whakawhanaungatanga. So of course there's ongoing relationships. We also, as part of the Māori Standing Committee, do have a working budget, and that's broken up into different areas or po. And definitely Matariki will feature as a significant event that we would want to, in support of Rangitani's submission before us, see as a highlight and a celebration down in the south. And we've got so many opportunities to really showcase that and feature that. So hope that answers your question.
Yes, thanks.
Add to that, we've been sponsoring the Wairarapa Kapahaka group, and with the planting the seed that at some point they may like to come down and do a performance for us in South Wairarapa. So we'll probably look to work on that.
Very good. We've got time for one more.
Just in terms of timing, let's say that we get the approved budget. When do you think we might be able to have a person in place as a Māori liaison officer?
Well, when would we, is it July? Is that when we know?
Yeah.
So if we were able to have our person in place in August for phase one, then we'd be looking for a year beyond that.
Cool. I think that's operational.
Yes, just
Yeah. Great. Guys, thank you very much.
Kia ora.
Oh, yes. Go.
Bring it to over. This is 645 on the LTP submissions. Joe, you have 5 minutes. We'll give you the gavel, but we do have our submission votes.
And thank you very much for inviting me along here to present my submission. It's a fairly straightforward submission. The first part lays claim to our deed of settlement and the iwi relationships that our deed of settlement has across all the councils. So I wanted to start off with that, and that crosses everything to do with working with iwi. So I was very interested in listening to the previous submission around the Māori liaison position that the council is looking at, because at the end of the day, that is what that position is. It's a Māori liaison position. To remind the council that that's what that was. My second area that I wanted to talk about was around climate change and the importance of having iwi at your table to discuss climate change and everything that goes with that. That's iwi rangi pane, kahanunu. With rangi pane and most probably kahanunu, once they settle, is the PSGEs, because it's really important that councils get their heads around the role of post-settlement governance entities and what we bring to the table. So councils where you have a PSG and a runanga at your table, you are very fortunate because you have two levels of discussion happening at your table. You have the upper level, it's not really an upper level, it's another level that the PSGs come from, which is purely Crown. It's to do with the relationships, it's to do with supporting and being compliant with the and aligning to the deed of settlement and around legislation. Whereas the iwi, when they come in, the runanga comes in, they are talking passion, they are talking as the voice of whānau and hapu, of the groups that they represent within our rohe. So it's very fortunate to have both levels of discussion happening at the table, to which I would